Hey, I'm Jusko from ProudMoney.com. Which credit card issuers have the easiest approval and which are not so easy? That is what we are going to tackle in this video. Do a little ranking. Now, last time we looked at this particular topic was about 2.5 years ago. It was during COVID. I think some things have changed since then. In this video, we're looking at the issuers' lineups overall. So which ones tend to be easier and which ones tend to be more difficult. We are not going to look at cards that are sort of for people with bad credit or even like low fair credit, things like Credit One, Mission Lane, Indigo, and a bunch of others out there where, yeah, it's easy to get approved, but oftentimes you're going to have a card that has an annual fee, may have a very high interest rate, all that sort of thing. So we're kind of looking more at the major credit card issuers and maybe some minor and regional credit card issuers. We're also not looking at all the individual credit cards. We've done that in other videos looking at the issuer as a whole. All right, so let's get started. Let me know in the comments if your thoughts are different than mine or if they are the same as mine. Everyone is going to have a little bit different experience with different issuers. It may depend on where you're sort of at when you go after a card from that issuer. But these are sort of generalizations based on my experience and from my wide knowledge of the credit card industry. So let's start with Synchrony Bank and Comenity Bank as the easiest places to get a credit card from. Both of these credit card issuers more well known for being issuers of other people's credit cards, being these sort of banks behind other people's credit cards, oftentimes retailers. On the Synchrony end, that is things like the Amazon Store Card, the Verizon Visa, the PayPal Cashback MasterCard, and a lot of others too. Synchrony also has its own Synchrony MasterCard that is a 2% flat cashback card. On the Comenity end, a similar kind of style in terms of how they run their business. They are the bank behind the NFL cards, Sephora, Victoria's Secret. They also have the Bread Cashback American Express card, which is a 2% flat cashback card. Just like all of the issuers we're going to talk about, some of these cards are going to be easier than others, but both of these issuers are known to be more open to people with maybe lower credit scores, and it's going to be easier on average to get a card from one of these two than probably any of the others on this list. Number 2 on this list, and remember we are on the easier end of things, is Discover, the issuer that I would consider to be the easiest of the major credit card issuers out there. Discover's lineup in terms of the rewards you get from their cards, only okay, but that's sort of by design because they know they are going to be letting in a lot of people who maybe are new to credit, maybe have had some past credit problems and their credit scores are not quite as high. So you're not getting the most amazing cards from Discover, but you're going to have an easier time getting in. Oftentimes people are going to have Discover as the first credit card they often had. Students are very aggressively courted by Discover. The secured credit card for people who are rebuilding credit is a very good one, and graduates oftentimes very quickly to an unsecured card. So Discover sort of looks at that market and they don't offer as much, but easier to get in. Number 3, Navy Federal Credit Union. If you qualify to be a member of Navy Federal, you might already know that they have a pretty decent credit card lineup. It is a little easier to be approved than it might be from some of the big banks. Oftentimes you're going to get higher credit limits than you might expect from some of the big banks. So there are a lot of big fans of Navy Federal out there. They are on the easier end of things if you qualify. I'm also going to throw in Pentagon Federal Credit Union here and USAA, sort of in the military themed cards here. I don't know if they're quite as easy as Navy Federal. I think they probably aren't, but still they are going to sort of do what they can to try to get their members approved, at least for something, depending on what your credit history looks like. So Navy Federal, easier than those other two, but I'm going to kind of lump them in there too. Number 4 is Capital One. Now, Capital One has a fairly large lineup of cards. Some of them are easier than others, but on average, I would say they're definitely one of the easier, especially of the major credit card issuers. Now, some of their cards, like the Saver cards and maybe the Venture X, those are going to be a little bit more difficult, especially if they're cards where they're giving very high credit limits. But the Quicksilver cards, the Venture and Venture One cards, and some of the other cards in their lineup are going to be much easier. Oftentimes, people that are sort of rebuilding their credit will end up in the Capital One Platinum MasterCard, which is a no-frills card, but it is a card that sort of gets you in oftentimes with one of the major issuers. So Capital One's reputation for quite a long time has been that they are on the easier end, even though there are those few cards that you're going to have a little higher credit score. Number 5, Goldman Sachs, which is the issuer of the Apple credit card and also the GM credit cards. When we did this video a couple years ago, Goldman Sachs and the Apple card in particular were even higher on the list in terms of how easy it was to get your hands on it. Things have gotten more difficult with Goldman Sachs, mostly because what Goldman Sachs found out after letting so many people in is that plenty of people defaulted and they lost an awful lot of money on the Apple card. Their sort of ambitions to have a full credit card lineup with the Apple card as sort of the beginning of that went away, and they just sort of restructured and tucked all their credit card operations off into a corner somewhere. I think they'd like to be out of credit cards altogether at this point. So it has gotten more difficult to get an Apple credit card, even though if you kind of look through the marketing materials on the Apple card site, you will still see enough there to make you think that it should be fairly easy to get the card. I think Goldman Sachs has raised the standards a little bit, but still on the easier end. Number 6 is Wells Fargo, and I don't know that I would say Wells Fargo is easy to be approved with, but I would say they are easier than a lot of the other biggest credit card issuers, partly because of the fact that Wells Fargo has been more aggressive about trying to get people into their credit cards, partially because of some of the reputation issues that Wells Fargo has had in the past with other banking products and credit cards as well. So right now, Wells Fargo has a pretty nice credit card lineup, especially if you're someone that likes no annual fee cashback cards with the Active Cash and the Autograph Visa, and the Built MasterCard is part of their lineup, although they kind of use it as a different branding on that one. But anyway, nice cards from Wells Fargo, but they've been pretty aggressive in trying to sort of rebrand themselves and change their reputation. And so I think that's made it a little easier to get your hands on their cards than maybe it would be in other circumstances. Number 7, American Express. Now, American Express has a varied credit card lineup. Some of their cards are going to be easier to get approved for than others. But overall, I think for a lot of people, when they think of American Express, they think it's going to be more difficult to be approved than it actually is. Oftentimes, people are pleasantly surprised. And I think American Express knows that they have that reputation a little bit, which is why in the last year or so, they have gone to their soft pull, soft inquiry application, where you can actually go online, fill out the application, see if you are going to be approved, and if you're not, you don't get any hit to your credit score. So they want to get more people into those applications for American Express cards. So they're basically saying, we're not going to hurt your credit score. You can come and give us a shot. Now, if they give you the credit card, then you're going to get the hard inquiry on your credit report, but you're not going to get hurt if you are not approved or if you decide you don't want the card. So that is American Express trying to get more people in, which shows you not that difficult to get your hands on one of their cards. Number 8 is Citi. Now, when I did this video a couple years ago, it was during the pandemic, I felt like Citi had a little bit lost their way and they were not really approving a ton of people because they weren't sure what they were doing, it seemed like, with their credit card portfolio. The portfolio hasn't changed that much, but with the introduction of the Citi Custom Cash in particular, I think they have cast a wider net and have tried to be more aggressive about getting people into their credit cards. So still not easy on the Citi end. We've already talked about, some major issuers that are potentially easier than Citi, but not as difficult as they used to be. Number 9 on this list might be a little bit of a cop-out, and I apologize in advance, but I'm going to lump together a bunch of banks here that are sort of those regional banks that don't really go toe-to-toe in the credit card game with the big dogs here. And so I'm thinking of things like PNC, Truist, TD Bank, Citizens Bank, FNBO, BMO Harris, Regions Bank. All of those kind of banks are not necessarily going to be super difficult to get their cards, but if you're someone maybe with a little lower credit score, or you're someone that does a lot of credit card shopping because you're chasing bonuses and that sort of thing, those banks aren't going to be as happy to bring you in, and they might be a little slower in terms of their approvals, a little more conservative in terms of adding new people in. Obviously, this is a bit of a generalization because there are so many of them, but oftentimes these smaller banks, they're just not competing in that way where they want to bring in as many customers as possible and where they're going to be very lenient in terms of who those customers are. All right, we've got 4 more issuers to talk about, and since we're getting to the bottom of the list, you could say that these are actually the most difficult of the credit card issuers. So the next one on the list is Bank of America. I would say Bank of America in some ways has a similarity in terms of maybe mindset to some of those regional banks They are looking for customers who are going to have a larger relationship with them. If you have a bank account or other account with Bank of America, you're going to have an easier time getting approved. Bank of America's cards are not overly generous unless you do have a larger relationship with them oftentimes. So they aren't really looking to go toe-to-toe with Chase and American Express and Capital One with big bonuses and huge rewards. They are much more about the fact that they have so many customers in banking that they can market to those customers over and over again. And if you're someone that doesn't pay a whole lot of attention to the credit card market, you'll probably be happy to get a card from Bank of America, not realizing that there may be better things out there. So not necessarily difficult to be approved for, but Bank of America is going to like you a lot better if they believe you're going to be a wider banking customer. All right, 3 more to go. Next up is Chase. Now, Chase has probably the most varied credit card lineup of any of the credit card issuers out there. Some of their cards not necessarily all that difficult to get your hands on. The Chase Freedom cards aren't super difficult. The Chase Sapphire cards are going to get more difficult because you've got cards that have a $5,000 minimum credit limit with the Chase Sapphire Preferred, $10,000 with the Chase Sapphire Reserve. You've got partner cards like Southwest and United and Amazon and Hyatt and others as well. So Chase has a lot of different cards out there. Chase oftentimes has very nice bonus offers for new card holders. So Chase oftentimes is offering a lot, and so that means that they also put a lot of sort of roadblocks in the way sometimes to stop people from taking too much advantage of their generosity. So the dreaded and infamous Chase 524 rule, the most well-known, meaning that Chase is not going to approve you if you have already been approved for 5 credit cards in the last 24 months. You're not going to get your 6th one from Chase. Oftentimes, Chase is going to want a year of credit history with somebody else before they will approve you for a credit card. The sort of exception I would say to that is if you have been with Chase as a banking customer otherwise, Chase, maybe more so than a lot of other banks, is going to look at that favorably, and probably that would increase your chances of being approved with them. So Chase is hard to generalize exactly because of all of those factors, but I would say they're on the more difficult end when it comes to being approved. All right, 2 more to go. Next is Barclays. Now, Barclays used to have a credit card lineup in the US of Barclays issued or branded credit cards. They have scrapped that, and now they are the issuing bank only behind partner credit cards for JetBlue, for Wyndham, for AARP, Hawaiian Airlines, and there are a bunch of others in their list as well. Barclays, because they are a partner with all of these, they have to be somewhat okay with approving people for their cards, but in my experience, they are always keeping you on a short leash. Their trust level with people coming in for their cards, and their trust level even once you have one of their cards, always seems very low to me. So there may be hurdles when you go to try to get one of their cards. There's going to be some reason that they have to ask you for some further verification of your information. Once you have the card, they're always going to think something's going on where your card is being fraudulently used, and you're going to have to call them up or whatever. I have had many things happen with Barclays that I just say to myself, why is this happening? I don't think I am the exception to the rule here with Barclays, so I think this is kind of how it is. People don't talk about their cards as much, so it's a little difficult to get a lot of data points from people of their experiences, but that's where I would put them. And then last on the list, the most difficult of the credit card issuers to be approved from is US Bank. And this is especially true if you're someone that tends to get a lot of credit cards. US Bank really prefers to add credit card users that they think are going to have some commitment to them. If you have a bank account with US Bank already, that is going to increase your chances of being approved because they want that wider relationship. If you have gotten a lot of cards in the recent past, US Bank not interested in you. In some cases, if you've gotten any credit cards in the last year, you might not even be able to get your hands on a card from US Bank. So they very much want to be a major player in your wallet. If they are going to give you a credit card, they want you to be sort of committed to them on a wider relationship with other products. So again, and I've probably said this 15 times during this video, it's not always about whether an issuer is difficult or easy to be approved from. Some of them easy enough to get their credit cards, but only if you meet those certain standards. If you're someone that gets a lot of credit cards, if you're like going after bonuses all the time, those kind of things, even if your credit score is super high, they are not interested. And that's sort of a trend in the banking industry in general. They want a little more commitment instead of just handing out credit cards like candy. But US Bank, probably the most difficult when it comes to that. So card hoppers, not welcome at US Bank and not welcome at some of these other banks, especially those at the end of the list that we just talked about, where others are going to be more lenient. Like I said at the beginning of this video, everyone's rankings would probably be different here because your own experience is going to be different oftentimes, because when you go to get a credit card, you are going to be at a different place than somebody else in terms of how long your credit history is, how much money you make, what your credit score is, whether you have a relationship already with the bank that you're trying to get a credit card from. So everyone's going to feel a little bit different. I'm going from my own experiences and obviously a long time spent reading other people's experiences and hearing about other people's thoughts about credit cards, but none of this is set in stone. It's sort of an intellectual exercise, and I would like to hear your intellectuality in the comment section below. Otherwise, I thank you for watching. And as always, please go to proudmoney.com, where we do credit card reviews, we talk personal finance, we talk deals, and all sorts of other fun stuff too. If for whatever reason you're not going to leave a comment or go visit proudmoney.com, the next thing I think you might want to do is watch that video right there.